Inflation is a hot topic right now. It comes up in so many conversations now because it hits us straight in our back pockets, or wherever you hold your wallet. Especially now as our inflation rates in the United States are the highest we've seen in over 30 years. But what exactly is inflation, and how long is this ridiculous inflation gonna last?
Just gotta last long enough for me to hit 32 PSI.
Oh gosh. Let's look at what economic inflation is, how it's gonna affect you and I here in 2021, and what we can do to fight it. All that right now. Hello there, I'm Caleb. If this is your first time here and you want to learn more about how to control your finances and master your budget, then start now by hitting the subscribe button so you don't miss out on anything. And hit that like button before I forget to ask you. Here's the Oxford definition of inflation: a general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. In short, that means inflation creates an effective loss in value of your money, meaning a dollar is still worth a dollar, it just can't buy as much. That's called a loss in purchasing power. Here are a few examples. Milk has risen in price since January. According to the USDA, a gallon of milk has gone up in price in Ohio from $2.70 to $3.22 per gallon. Now don't tell me that doesn't directly affect the cost of chocolate milk. Boo! Same with all kinds of fuel. Unfortunately, my job is such that I have to drive about 100 miles a day for it. In the last year, gas prices have raised over $1 per gallon, hitting an average of $3.49 per gallon. That means in a normal 4-week month, I'm paying an extra $93 in fuel just to get to and from work, and hitting costs. According to the same U.S. Energy Information Administration, propane prices are up an average of 88 cents per gallon now over last year. Now, according to Rocket Mortgage, the average home size in America is 2,301 square feet. When I talked to our propane supplier, that would cost on average over $1,000 more to heat a home during the winter in Columbus, Ohio. Inflation really hits the wallet hard, and though many politicians are inclined to downplay inflation's effects, it's really the fact that everything costs a little and sometimes a lot more, and it all adds up. When it comes to inflation, the United States Federal Reserve actually shoots for a 2% annual inflation rate. Sounds weird because it doesn't seem like eroding the dollar's value would make any sense. No pun intended. But according to the Federal Reserve, a 2% inflation rate actually helps maintain a stable economy, because overly low inflation can cause low inflation expectations, and in their own words, if inflation expectations fall, interest rates would decline too. In turn, there would be less room to cut interest rates to boost employment during an economic downturn. In short, a 2% inflation rate helps maintain healthy expectation for homes and businesses when it comes to their economic decisions. And the Federal Reserve is able to somewhat control the inflation rate by increasing or decreasing interest rates on consumers and businesses. Here's the crazy part. Here in 2021, our inflation is 3 times that of the targeted 2% rate. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the inflation rate for the past year has been 6.2%, meaning every dollar that you had at the beginning of the year is now effectively worth 94 cents. Fortunately, every like on this video maintains its value to me regardless of inflation. Anyways, jump-started by a global pandemic, inflation has really caused some issues as the United States is trying to get the economy back to normal. When this kind of thing happens over a short period of time, economists like to call this transitory inflation. Transitory inflation is a term used for inflation that isn't expected to have a permanent influence on the economy long term. You may have heard this term quite a bit recently because last week in a congressional hearing, the Fed chairman Jerome Powell said that they need to retire the term because they believe that this inflation is going to affect us for a longer period of time. How long? No one really knows. It'll probably affect us at least well into 2022. In the words of Fortune magazine, all of that's to say there is no longer a short-lived trend, something that officials like Powell and Yellen are finally admitting publicly this week after months of hedging their bets that rising inflation would start to ease off. Kind of looks like inflation is here to stay, at least for a little bit. Which sucks because CNBC had an article back in June that showed while the economy is seeing wage growth among the average American, inflation was actually causing a 2% effective pay cut. It's like getting a raise and still not being able to pay for groceries. So how do we move forward from here? What's the best way for us to hedge inflation so that we can protect our money against its effects? Well, for one, don't beat yourself up when it comes to your budget. I was reminded of this when I read an article recently from the Wall Street Journal titled, "In Inflation Denial? Your grocery bill will wake you up." It made me realize 2 things. 1, some things are just gonna cost more. Make the appropriate changes in your budget and move on. For Bailey and I, it really did come down to the fact that our grocery bill went way up. But I was in inflation denial thinking, oh, if we're really careful, then we can stick to the same budget for our groceries. Same with our propane option, which cost us $400 more for the discounted prepaid option over last year. The fact is, instead of overspending a line item, inflation requires that we change it. So if you can't stay in the same range for certain items within your budget, don't beat yourself up. Just make the changes that you need to, because a budget is meant to flex as your needs change. And number 2, change your spending where you can. This article that I mentioned from the Wall Street Journal really is about the fact that a lot of people aren't changing their spending to reflect the change in inflation. Well, while I don't want you to beat yourself up for missing the mark on certain expenses within your budget, I also want to encourage you to not deny inflation in not changing your spending in areas where you actually can. Groceries, gasoline, heating costs, they're all a bit more difficult to change. But consumeristic spending is absolutely something that you can control, and that's especially relevant as we near the holidays. Just because you may be seeing some wage growth doesn't mean that you should spend it. Just be careful of your needs versus your wants. And remember, your budget is going to be your most valuable tool in controlling your money during this time. Now, before we get into more of the nitty-gritty suggestions, I gotta tell you, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm gonna give you some suggestions, but you really gotta do your own research. Talk to an investment professional about your own situation if you need help. The next step, throw the money that you have into a high-yield savings account. It won't offset inflation, but it will help a little bit. And please don't stop paying off debt in this high inflation time. People will claim that paying minimums on your debts will hedge inflation because the interest rates on your debt won't actually change, which is technically true with low interest debt, anything less than the current inflation rate of 6%. But what it doesn't do is change the fact that you're indebted to someone and your financial freedom is being withheld from you. So I'm going to encourage you to stick to it, keep paying off that debt. Make sure that once it's done, you hit that savings for the emergency fund hard. Because in times like this, having no debt aside from your mortgage and having a fully funded 3 to 6 month emergency fund will protect you the most when it comes to economic uncertainties. The high yield savings account is where I'd stick my emergency fund. Right now we have ours in Discover, which provides a 0.4% interest rate. Now the last thing I want you to do is invest. Get the debt out of your life, build your emergency fund, and get your money into the stock market, especially those tax-advantaged accounts like Roth 401ks and Roth IRAs. The stock market is one of the best hedges against inflation right now. Real estate is another great way to fight inflation, but the market is so crazy right now, you really have to know what you're doing in order to make it worth it. So what's your experience with inflation and how do you plan to combat it? Let me know in the comments down below. Having said all that, if you need help with your money, figuring out a budget, cutting expenses, paying off debt, or whatever, I'm happy to help. Just hit the link in the description down below so that we can set up a time to talk and I can understand your situation. Then together we can figure out if financial coaching makes sense for you personally. Otherwise, hitting the like button is the best way for you to tell me that you found value in this video. And hitting the subscribe button and notification bell is the best way to stay up to date on financial tips and tricks for your personal finances. And remember, money doesn't have to be confusing. You can control it. If you want to watch my most recent video, then check out this link up here. And if you want to watch a playlist all about financial tips to help you with controlling your money, then check out this playlist down here.